Thank you, Cathaoirleach. I do need to address and welcome Minister to the House. I do need to address the fact that there aren't any Fianna Fáil people here. I know you are the spokesperson, and I appreciate. I'll deal in a minute with what the content of your speech, but I do think it's ironic for them. You know, all this piping about Sinn Féin not taking their seats in Westminster and not taking their seats in Westminster, and we see all these empty seats here. You know, they might be dying to get to Westminster. I don't know. Maybe you could answer that, Cathaoirleach. But you know, maybe
not from the chair anyway.
But you know, maybe these seats aren't good enough for them. Maybe they need to be in Westminster. I'm not sure what kind of an impact they think that they would make in this. No.
You're going to hold for yourself in this one, Rose. I shouldn't be standing up for Fianna Fáil. You're digging a hole for yourself in this one, Rose. Didn't read the notes. Keep away from it, Rose. Keep away from it.
Sorry, everybody. Hold on. Sorry, Senator Warfield.
No, but
statements
really
on the budget are what we're doing
Maybe
today.
it's that they can't stretch out in these seats. I'm not too sure. We'll see when they get to
This is statements on the budget.
But anyway, I'm going to Fianna Fáil.
Well, I'm here, and I'm still here.
I'm glad you're there, Chair.
So am I.
Now, I do want to deal with the budget, and I do think there's no matter how you spin this budget, it's an anti-rural budget, and it does fail to give workers and families a break. It really does, and I'll demonstrate to you a couple of things and how it does that. But the overarching litmus test for the budget was, does it narrow the gap between the haves and the have-nots? And do the measures contained in it lead to a fairer redistribution of wealth, provide equality of opportunity and equal access to essential public services that are fit for purpose? And I don't think it has. Has it been rural-proofed? And will it address the regional imbalances that previous budgets have premeditated? I thought that was a Fianna Fáil. As it was demonstrated in Sinn Féin's alternative budget, when Pearse Doherty clearly established how the books could be balanced by ending the tax avoidance scheme. And I do appreciate, Minister, that you have done a couple of things within this budget that we have wanted to do for a long time in relation to the real estate taxes and some of the tax avoidance measures, and I have to acknowledge that. Now, it doesn't go nearly far enough in terms of the redistribution that we need in order to be able to provide the services that we need, but I appreciate that at least you have started the journey. But, you know, I suppose in the alternative budget we have shown how the tax avoidance schemes for the Golden Circle and using them, how we could use the money to address the needs of those who are continuously fleeced and denied or made to wait for services and supports they desperately need. And when I say continuously fleeced, I have an insurance quote here for a local business who provides lots of employment in the area. And yeah, no, and I know you will, Minister, but I want to get across the point of how fleeced businesses and individuals are. And I'm not sure that that's fully appreciated. For your insurance to go from 19,000 last year without any claims or anything else to then it going to 49,000 this year to cover 2/3 of the business isn't right. And I'm really concerned. And I'll tell you why.
Very valid point, but it's not really relating to the budget.
Well, it's very, very related. And I'll tell you why it's related. Because the measures that are put in the contingency fund here, and I acknowledge as well, we said right from the beginning in terms of the rainy day fund and in terms of the inflexibilities there in what we needed to do. But it's not enough. It's not enough to save those businesses. And I'm concerned when you say that, viable businesses, will be supported, or how we determine which businesses. So if those businesses who are being fleeced by insurance companies and other charges, how long will it take before they are inviable businesses because of the charges they have, or that they're not viable? So that's my connection to it. But when we look at the services and supports that are desperately needed, we look at things like a healthcare procedure, an affordable home, even a seat on the school bus, or a home care package, or affordable insurance, as I said, or a secure job. And I know we talk about employment all the time and increased employment, but the fact is that there are so many people who are categorised as being in employment, But there's no point in having a job if you can't afford to have a roof over your head and you can't afford to pay the bills. That's the problem with it. You know, it's just a manipulation of the figures. So if you have somebody on 0-hour contracts, or they have no certainty and they're on a very low wage, and yet they don't have they don't meet the thresholds for a medical card or anything like that, those people are living in poverty, and those are the people that we have to. That's why we have to do the redistribution of income. Now, the glaring omission, Minister, in this budget is the absence of a wealth tax. And I suppose the question is, why is this government with Fianna Fáil so reluctant to introduce a wealth tax? Do you really think that the non-stop accumulation of wealth by a very small proportion of society is sustainable or justified? Can't you see that even those who are facilitated to avoid paying tax on extreme wealth will be worse off living in a society of unrest and turbulence caused by inequality and marginalisation? These are the people that, even in the recent recession, sat and watched their assets multiply and multiply in value due to the massive quantitative easing programme throughout the EU and beyond. Now, this isn't earned income. All they have to do is to sit there and watch while the policies, whether it be European policy or our own policy, increases their wealth all the time. And then if we contrast that, say, to a home help worker who does an extra couple of hours in a week, or a farmer who goes over and above his farm assist threshold, they are hauled in before the government department and that money is taken off them. And I think that is where the real unfairness is. The only difference between the two is that the earned income of the ordinary worker is mostly spent in the community, creating jobs and having the Keynesian effect in stimulating the economy with the multiplier effect. So it makes no sense whatsoever for this government with Fianna Fáil to treat workers and families like this, while continuing a policy that leaves the top 5% owning over 46% of wealth and the top 1% owning over 27% of wealth. It just doesn't. It doesn't add up, and it certainly doesn't add up for workers and for families across this state. Is it that it's easier for this government with Fianna Fáil to take the few euros travel allowance from the youngsters with disabilities who are trying to access training or education with autism, and children with autism and young people with autism having to beg for school places? I have children at the moment, or young people in Achill. They have to get to Castlebar and this is why this whole carbon tax debate doesn't make any sense in the climate change. So they have to get to Castlebar to the nearest training centre because everything is centralised. Now, not only would that be a 3-hour round trip, but it's like they don't have any transport. So the HSE will say, we have no money. Everybody else say, we have no money, we have no money. There's no money for you, there's no money for you. And that is the gross unfairness. So for me, when I'm looking at this budget, I'm looking at it through the lens of those families who desperately want to access these services for their children. And surely at this time, when we as a small open economy are vulnerable to external shocks, or should we say certainties, such as Germany's declining economy, China's slowdown, the American trade wars, topped off by Brexit, we should be investing in key infrastructure that will produce jobs and indigenous businesses, while implementing fiscal policy that encourages, as I said, the multiplier effect. Now, I want to address the issue of carbon tax. We already have a carbon tax. Since 2010, we collected 3.35 billion in carbon tax. Last year alone, we collected 435 million in carbon tax. Now, can you tell me, Minister, how much of this has been ring-fenced for climate action measures? And that is why Sinn Féin is opposed to any increase in this carbon tax, purely because it's not working, and it will hit those who can least afford it and those living in rural Ireland. Because carbon tax is an instrument of economists, not climatologists. 3.35 billion collected to date has failed to reduce emissions. In fact, they have increased. Yet Britain has no carbon tax and its emissions have reduced. Norway introduced a carbon tax in 1996 and its emissions have increased. The truth is the carbon tax raises revenue. It does not reduce carbon emissions. Hear, hear. Fine Gael and their partners in government, Fianna Fáil, tell us that they will change people's behaviour. This is awfully important. Yet for many of us living in rural Ireland, you have failed to invest in the alternatives. Keeping warm and mobility are the behaviours in question. The fact that we don't have a public transport system, many children don't even have a seat on the bus to school. So how do you hope to change people's behaviours? Do you want us all to stay at home? You centralise all the services, yet provide no transport. A 6-hour round trip in a taxi to Galway University Hospital already costs in excess of a whole week's pension for many elderly people who have to attend on a regular basis. So how much do you think it's going to cost now? And have you or Fianna Fáil ever considered how you are pushing people in rural Ireland into poverty because of your skewed and thoughtless policies? When we try to...
Senator.
Yeah, OK. I'm not going to say any more, but you cannot change somebody's behaviour without giving them an alternative. It's as simple as that.
You've made the point. You're over 11 minutes now. So
I wish somebody would take the point.
Point made.
Well said.